Hey everybody, welcome to the newest episode of The Bearded Gamer Show. As always, I'm your host with the fantastic beard. That's right, Chris Arnone. Straight into good news, bad news. So first up, we've got some good news. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the PS3 when it first got going, had some notoriety for being very difficult to develop for. It was a very challenging platform compared to like the Wii or the 360, which is pretty comparable to a PC as far as development. Well, it seems Sony may have finally learned their lesson. The PlayStation Vita, they're saying, is much, much easier to develop for. I think they really saw that as a barrier of entry for a lot of third-party developers and didn't want to repeat that same mistake. So they've actually made it much easier to develop for. And I think that's a little obvious with the sheer size of the launch titles and launch window titles. Just that list is pretty huge compared to the PS3 or just about any other console. Now, one other piece that came with this, they were talking to Sony about this, is this push for this PlayStation Suite. And this is developers can come in and develop for a variety of Android devices, and optionally they can make that game compatible with the Vita. So I think they're really trying to help bring in third parties, bring people in, learn from the mistakes, not only their own mistakes on the PlayStation 3, but also some of those early mistakes made by the Nintendo 3DS. So good for them. Some more good news. Now, Alan Wake, loved the game. Came out on 360 about 2 years ago. It was wonderful. And now through sheer persistence and nagging, Remedy got it up on PC 2 years later. Well, within 48 hours, they were able to recoup their costs for development and marketing the PC version. So that's just astonishing to me. Now, I'm sure they didn't spend a whole lot transitioning from 360 to PC and then doing a little bit of a marketing push, but it's wonderful that there's still enough of an interest out there from people who don't have 360s, or at least didn't buy it on 360, and wanted to pick it up and play it. And I think it's one of those games that could have sold better. I think when they eventually make a full-blown sequel, will sell really well because the first one was so well received. But here, 2 years later, now it's gained so much notoriety and praise from critics that the PC crowd jumped on it and grabbed it pretty quickly. So good for Remedy. I'm glad to see them doing well with that. All right, last piece of good news. So the Nintendo 3DS got that really slow start. Really struggled, didn't have any good first-party titles out the gates, which of course is Nintendo's bread and butter. And they did a price drop. First time they've ever had to do this, is do such a massive price drop so early in the console's cycle. Well, they've now surpassed 5 million units sold in Japan, which makes it Japan's fastest selling console ever. So, this speaks volume to, I know the last episode I was talking about how the portable console is not dead, it still has a place. Well, obviously it still has a place. It's outpaced in the same time period the DS. And once again, this record is for time. Of course, it's not sold as many as the DS, but it's fastest selling. So this is just under a year it hit the 5 million mark in Japan, which is just phenomenal. So, all right, enough with the news. Let's talk some comics with the pull list. So, it's about that time again for me to recommend some comic books for you to pick up this week. As always, let me remind you, please go visit your local comic book shop. Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. Yes, in nerddom, that is like its own weekly recurring holiday. It's wonderful. So go find your local comic book shop if you haven't already. Talk to your local comic book guru. Find out what recommendations they have and take mine as well. Pick up some books. They'll be wonderful. First recommendation, Broken Pieces #2. Now this one, imagine you're becoming a zombie. Well, it's not strictly a zombie, but a little more complex than that, but that's roughly the idea. So you're becoming a zombie, but you're aware you're becoming a zombie. You still have some wherewithal, and in fact, the scientific breakthroughs you made before you started to turn is what's keeping you holding on to just this little shred of your humanity. Well, this is kind of what's going on, the concept behind Broken Pieces. I really dig it. It's got this sort of creepy, zombie vibe, but it's also Aspen, so it's gorgeous. I mean, everything Aspen does, they just do top-notch artwork. A lot of their guys that they discover that start off there have become, sort of superstars now. And it's a wonderful little tale. And nice thing with anything you get into with Aspen is they always do sort of shorter volumes. So you can get into this. This is issue 2. You can probably still find copies of issue number 1 in your store, and it'll probably run 6-8 issues, and it's a self-contained story, which is kind of nice. It's not that just constantly ongoing thing you have a lot like the big two. So go check that one out. But speaking of continuous sagas, Flash number 6 is my second recommendation. Now, this is Barry Allen is going to investigate a murder that's 150 years old. So this really cold case. Now, I would have recommended Flash a while ago. I was waiting for them to finish up a story arc, but Francis Manapul has been doing the art on this, and he is just one of my favorites. He got his start, got really going doing Iron and the Maiden, let me be very clear about that, for Aspen. And I loved it. It's pretty much the reason I picked up those books was because Francis, his art was just amazing. And, now he's been doing The Flash, and they're starting a new arc, and it should be wonderful. And I highly recommend it to anyone. One of my absolute favorite comic book artists out there today. All right, next recommendation, No Place Like Home, number 1. Now, this is a story about a young lady who comes back to Kansas when her parents are killed by a freak tornado, but then she starts to uncover all this stuff about this mystery killer, and it's sort of this Wizard of Oz retelling with this little goth chick, and it's really funky, really offbeat, but I'll tell you what, it's really cool, and I'm enjoying what I'm reading of it so far. It's sort of like, Stephen King crosses with Wizard of Oz, and I think that's just a winning combination. I'm very much looking forward to picking up this book tomorrow. Yes, going to go grab that one myself. All right, final recommendation for this week, X-Men Legacy 626. So this is actually the second part of a story arc, but this is, of course, Wolverine's X-Men fighting Exodus. I've always been a fan of Exodus, of course, as a villain, since he was introduced back in the 90s. He's just this real complex character, really powerful, really unpredictable. And in this issue, they're promising for the first time since the Wolverine-Cyclops split, the teams are also going to go up against each other. And, we've all been waiting for that ever since this whole divide occurred. So that's going to be heading our way in this issue right around the corner. So, okay, enough recommendations. Once again, as I always say, please support your local comic book shop. Go buy comics, whether it's in print, that's my preference, or even digital. You're still supporting an industry that's really struggling and really needs it and has such wonderful, wonderful talent and creative people behind it. So, let's finish up with the Controller Confessional. Now, we hear a lot of rumors and talk about the next generation of consoles, the Xbox 720, maybe that's what it'll be called, likely called PlayStation 4, this next generation. I will put the caveat, maybe the Wii U. We still don't know the horsepower, whether this is the last of the 7th or the first of the 8th generation, so it's hard to say. But a lot of people, when I talk about the next generation, they kind of go, I don't want a next generation. I think a lot of this is because, well, no one wants to be throwing down $400, $500, $600 for a new console anytime soon. A lot of people are like, there's still a lot of life, there's still a lot of games. Yeah, all that's true. But you know what? Maybe I'm weird. I'm craving the next generation because I see what it can possibly do. So I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons. Some are big, some are a little small, of why we should be hopeful and hope that the new generation comes sooner rather than later. Okay, my number 5 reason, multitasking. Now, this is something that people maybe don't think of or wouldn't put much use to, but for me it would be huge. I watch a lot of videos on my PS3, for instance, copy them over on my network, but of course I can't copy a file over while I'm also playing a game. Or, a lot of people enjoy life with PlayStation, when it was the folding at home, back when that happened. Well, once again, you can't do folding at home and play a game. Or, various other things. Whereas with a computer, you can have some program running in the background and be playing a game if you've got enough horsepower. And this is just something the consoles can't do. They're all very, very limited on RAM right now, and they just don't have this capability. So that's something I think would be nice, to be able to run both of these. Or maybe, not every game has custom soundtracks. So if you had a built-in media player, don't care what game you have, you could fire up your media player, playing some music, jump into your game, have them both running at the same time. That would be nice. Or, a browser or Twitter or Facebook or something like that. If you like to, constantly switch back and forth, it would give people that freedom if you had more horsepower. Number 4 reason, Kinect will no longer suck. In games, that is. Kinect is a phenomenal device. What it's done outside of gaming is just amazing. What it's done in surgeries and the medical field is just crazy. And with the PC developers kit, some really just outstanding things. But the 360 really doesn't have the power to do as much with it as any of us would like. Original specs put a processor inside the Kinect. Well, the final version doesn't have it. So part of that triple core processor that you get in the 360 is going to power and really utilize the Kinect. And that's a lot of input, the visual and audio input. That's a lot. That's a lot more than just the simple ones and zeros that come from button presses on a controller. So it's having to process all that and then still, present you with a game. So there's very much a limit to what we can do for Kinect games right now. Well, I think I almost guarantee you that's going to be a big push with the next generation Xbox. It's just going to have a lot of horsepower dedicated to running Kinect and getting us some, 60 frames per second, really high-end games that are also doing Kinect. So looking forward to that part. Number 3, bigger media for all. Now the PS3 has it, which is great, has Blu-ray. It was, Sony's pretty much the innovator of that technology. But the 360 lags behind, and I could have just as well put up a picture of L.A. Noire, and I've talked about this before, how there was so much more content that they had to cut out to be able to fit it on the disc, and there were like 3 discs, I think, on the 360, and then a Blu-ray. But if you go dual layer or triple layer or quad layer on a Blu-ray, they could have fit all that in there. But of course, how many discs would you have gone to on 360? And I think that was part of the trouble there. So, once again, this is one of these things, I guarantee you, Xbox, the next Xbox, is going to go to a larger physical media format, and Blu-ray's the way to go. They may not like supporting Sony in that respect, but it's the de facto. And, they're going to need to put Blu-ray playback on there as well if they want to compete with Sony in that next generation. So it's going to have Blu-ray, I can almost guarantee it. But that also puts them both on the same size physical media. So you no longer have to cut corners on how much content you're putting on the disc because it's the same on both. Also, no disc switching, which is slightly annoying still. All right, number 2 reason, reduced loading times. I mean, come on, we're always wanting this. From one generation to the next, on PC, whatever we're playing on, we always want less load times. They suck. And there are certain games like, Need for Speed, I'm blanking on the name of it, the one, The Run, there it is. My God, it was more load times than it was racing. It was ridiculous. And yeah, part of that, of course, is the game designer, the game developer. They just, didn't organize the data well enough to where it would load up in any proper fashion. But, having more horsepower and, faster spinning physical media and whatnot and better installs will all help that along. So that will just be wonderful. And my number 1 reason, that comes along with all this wonderful horsepower, of course, is the ability to do more things graphically. And I'm going to show a video for you, and it's one I'm sure you've seen before. It's been out for a while now, the Unreal Engine 3 running this Samaritan demo, which I've been told, I've read that it just doesn't do it justice to watch it online in any form, because the true one is running on 3 GTX 580s in the NVIDIA graphics cards. And so to see one truly run off of a PC running the tech demo itself, not just a video of the tech demo, is what's really impressive, but it's what we are capable of. I think with the next generation, we're not going to see a real big leap graphically, but the horsepower, that's the difference. We can pack more in there. And I think specifically with things like, how many NPCs you have on the screen at a time, how quickly the load is of distances and things that move and all of this stuff, that I think is going to be the real big difference. A lot of things that we do see on PC that we are capable of, let's get there and maybe even surpass it. So, in case you haven't seen it, wow, get out from under your rock, but here is the Unreal Samaritan video, tech demo that was put out by Epic, and we'll see you next time.